Okay, guys, I know some of you have been struggling with these issues and the compromises in this assignment. So I'm going to go through a little bit. I'll only do issue 1 on this video, and then I'll do the other issues 1 video at a time. I'm actually going to model all of issue 1 for you on this. I won't be for 2, 3, and 4, but the videos will still help. So if you want to go ahead and follow along, I will give you a little bit of help. Be patient. I'm not the greatest at YouTube, but I am learning. So here is your graphic organizer I'm asking you to fill out. Yours, of course, is online. You do not need to print anything. This is just for the sake of the video for me to help you understand. The first thing you can do each time is that the issue is right here. You don't need to come up with anything new, anything exciting. Our issue to be discussed is actually just the title. So what I'm going to do is it says issue 1, how will the states and people be represented in new government? That's really what you write right here. So how will the states and the people be represented in the new government? Let me back up because not everyone did the work previously regarding our first Constitution, which was called the Articles of Confederation. What we found is it didn't work. So we as a people had made the Articles of Confederation. We were not happy with how it's working. And now at this point in history, the Constitution is being written. And so there's some disagreements and we're working on making compromises for the Constitution. So there we are. There's our first little bit. I'm going to go a paragraph or 2 at a time, and we'll get our organizer filled out. So paragraph 1 really is just giving you some background. It says, under the Articles of Confederation, states, and thus the people, were evenly represented in the government. To the founders, the greatest fear was a strong government. Naturally, they balanced state power as well to ensure no state had more power than another. Precisely, each state was held to one vote on all matters. Even though a state could send no more than 7 people to represent their state's interests in Congress, when it came time to vote on key issues, all states were held to one vote. So before the Constitution, every state got one vote. So now we're going to come to our first side or our first opinion. It says, largely populated states like Virginia and Pennsylvania felt that the current structure gave smaller states far more power, which initially it really did. Is it fair for a state with 500,000 people to have control over a state with 5 million people? Edmund Randolph, a representative from Virginia, crafted the Virginia Plan. So this is our first side right there to address the issue. He proposed a Congress that reflected the entirety of the United States population. His plan involved a bicameral Congress, which means 2 sides or 2 groups, where states received votes in each side based on their population. For example, large states like Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Massachusetts would receive more votes than smaller states like Delaware, Rhode Island, and Georgia. Distributing power based on the state's population ensured that Congress would always reflect the desire of the people. So if we come up here and we do side number 1, there is a title for this. It is the Virginia Plan. Some things it didn't tell you, but one thing we know is that it still said there should be 3 branches of government. So that is not changing. Just like we have today and just like we had with our Articles of Confederation, there's an executive, a judicial, and a legislative branch. It also thought that the legislative branch should have the most power, meaning they got to choose the other 2 branches, which are executive and judicial. So they're saying that we wouldn't get to vote for the president, the legislative would vote for it. And we know that this isn't how it ends up. Here's the most important difference. I'm going to go ahead and star it. The biggest thing is they said we would have a bicameral legislature. And if you remember, it meant 2. So we're going to have 2 different groups in Congress. Of those groups, both of them would have representation based on states' population. And so when I grade this, you better have something about states population. This means that the larger states liked it. We'll put larger states here. And it's not always just larger in terms of size, though generally it's also larger in terms of population. So you can have a smaller state that has a pretty big population as well. All right, so now we have to have another side. Obviously, it's going to be the small states who want their own response. So in response, smaller states responded with a plan of their own called the New Jersey Plan. Proposed by William Patterson, this plan changed little from the original structure under the Articles. It kept the unicameral Congress. That means there was only one with equal power intact. So you wouldn't have a House of Representatives and a Senate. You're only going to have one. The argument was simple that the small states, simple from the small states. If representation was based on population, then large states would command too much power, and the voice of the smaller states would be lost forever. So they're saying that's not fair. Just because you might have more people doesn't mean that we don't count too, particularly if you're thinking about how large states could have interests like environmental interests that could then impact small states and could initially be pretty unfair. So our second side is called the New Jersey Plan. All right. So our New Jersey Plan also has 3 branches of government. We're not changing that. All right. But this is where it's a little different. You have your legislative branch, which is Congress. They get to choose the executive branch, which is the president. But then rather than the legislative getting to pick the judicial branch also, instead the executive branch then gets to choose justices, which of course makes it justices, which equals the Supreme Court. And that would be our judicial branch, Supreme Court. So the difference right there is here, the legislative branch got to pick everybody. Here we have legislative picks executive, executive picks the judicial. And then here's our big difference, okay? We're going to have a unicameral legislator, which means there's only one group in the legislature, one group in Congress. And that is all going to be based where everyone gets the same representation. All states get same representation. So it's not based on how big you are. Everybody gets 1 vote, everybody gets 2 votes. Whatever it might be, everybody gets the same. Just like the other side, this one is the smaller states who supported it. So we now have 2 different opinions. One that says we should base everything off of population, and one that says that we should base everything where it's fair and even. So now we come down to our conclusion, and it's going to tell you the compromise that we make, and this one's pretty important. It's actually called the Great Compromise. So the debate lasted for weeks until a great compromise was reached, also called the Connecticut Compromise. This plan was proposed by Robert Sherman and Oliver Ellsworth of Connecticut. It created a bicameral Congress with one side benefiting small states and the other side benefiting large states. In the House, states would receive votes based on their population. Each state was guaranteed at least one representative and would get another for every 30,000 people who lived there. The Senate was created to satisfy small states. Here, each state received 2 senators, no matter what its population. To further balance the power between both sides, all decisions needed a 51% approval in both sides, meaning that one side wouldn't be stronger than the other. Therefore, the compromise guaranteed that both large and small states would have to work together to make the government function. So we're going to have a Senate. In that Senate, you're going to have each state with 2 senators, and there will have to be a 51% approval from it. You're also going to have a House of Representatives, and that would be based on population. Every 30,000 people would be 1 vote, and that also would need the 51%. So let's come over here to our compromise and explain what happened. So I first want you to write the Great Compromise because it was a pretty big deal. Go ahead and label each of these when you work in a minute and compromise, excuse me. Go ahead and make sure you label each of them so you know what kind they are. All right, so we still have 3 branches of government. And we will come back to that later on how we compromise to make that work. But it's not a part of this. This is really our legislative compromise. What we do know, though, is that there's going to be a checks and a balance, meaning that no one's in charge of another more than one. So there's a checks and balances system put in place, which is, of course, what we have today, because this is where we're on. Now, here's where legislature worked. We had a bicameral, meaning there are 2 branches to make everybody happy. So our first one, we have your House of Representatives. It is based on state population. And as we know, that's going to make the large states happy. So we're going to put large states and a happy face because that made them happy. But then you also have Senate, because we had to make everyone happy, and it was equal to equal representation. And what it is, and it is still today, is 2 senators per state. And so this made smaller states happy. Hopefully this will help you. I will go ahead and give you some more help with the other issues. I just won't go through the entire organizer with you. Okay? Thank you guys, and good